Hello, this is Tuesday, March 20th, 2018, and this is the weekly Sig Docs meeting for Kubernetes in the Kubernetes channel, all Kubernetes, all the time. So let's start with new contributors. Do we have anyone joining us for the first time or someone who just plain feels new? Well, I don't recognize Jay Moscow, but that's not saying anything. I don't recognize the.
Hello. I guess I feel pretty new. I've submitted a few pull requests so far to the docs that have been accepted, and I think currently the one I have on there now is related to kubectls installation, and it was marked as a large or an extra large, I believe.
Cool.
But I, would like to continue to contribute to the documentation, and I enjoy working on the project. And it's been a lot of fun so far.
Well, excellent. We're glad that you're here. Thank you for joining us. All right. Let's start with an update on 1.10. Jennifer, how is 1.10 going?
1.10 is going. 1.10 is a little interesting this week. We have a PR in to revert an alpha feature because reverting the PRs for the feature itself will break things. And that just got approved this morning, which means I closed one docs PR unmerged. It was not in a great state anyway. So that was fortunate. That simply means less work for me finishing things up. There's one more PR that I discussed with Joe and Steve yesterday that I am going to merge. It appears to have passed technical review. It needs some more doc love, but persuading any further changes in the PR seems burdensome to everybody. So it's going to be easier to merge it and then submit a fast follow to fix things up. So that's the only bit of content-related work that I have. Later today, I'm going to start systematically picking through generating the docs for next week. Otherwise, the release is looking on target for Monday, I think. I dropped off early because I wanted to join this meeting. There's, late-breaking red tests. So, we don't know for sure till Monday, but that's where we are. The docs piece is looking in pretty good shape.
Okay.
We will get a updated go no go signal on Thursday.
Yep.
At least on the last scary progression on performance consumption.
Yep. I thought that I was catching that as I was dropping off. So thanks for the confirmation.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah, the release week is always exciting, even if sometimes only in the molecular sense. So last week, Jennifer, we had talked briefly about reaching out for help if you needed any content-related review, but it sounds like that's probably in a good place.
It is.
Okay. Well, if that changes, and if you need help with anything, please.
I absolutely will. I absolutely will.
You got this really well nailed down.
Right now, yeah. We'll check in again next week.
Okay. Hang in there. Good luck. Okay, moving on. So Andrew and Caleb wanted to talk about front-loading docs in the release process. So Caleb, go for it. Yeah. Hello, first of all. Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
Good to see y'all. I don't come here as nearly as often as I should. So I guess one of the things I've been working on as a member of Sig Release with Joe and Brian, a group of other people, is the KEP process. We all have, I guess, slightly different high-level goals around that, but mine was largely based on my experience trying to wrangle release notes at the end of the Kubernetes release, and discovering that the the release notes attached to pull requests were generally not particularly high quality, and not it wasn't clear who the audience was for that work. So there was a lot of following up with the SIGs or the individual contributors, which is not a great situation, especially if the contributor is working at one of these large companies like us here at Google or Microsoft or Red Hat, where you should have much more idea of the user experience while you are starting implementation. It's not like it's a surprise and you're not making like these kind of drive-by commits in the general case. So I would love to explore ways we can use the KEP process to try and help front load some of the, I guess, the vomit draft quality release notes as a part of the normal development process. So we can start front loading this and start getting the eyes on that rather than waiting until the end, because it's painful release over release. I mean, obviously we are improving release over release, but I still think there's ways we can improve. And I've been looking at, been following, not super closely, but tangentially to the Rust project. And I think they do a really good job with their RFCs in terms of documenting it, upcoming large changes, both for other developers and for users of Rust. So I would love to use their work as a guiding kind of lodestar there.
And then maybe I should give some background on the doc side, because so in previous meetings we've talked about like, yeah, how do we get involved earlier on in the process so that we can work with the engineers to get them to write some of the documentation before the end of like the release cycle. And I think we had discussed some ideas like maybe assigning different writers to SIGs and communicating with that, but it seemed like a lot of overhead and we didn't make much progress on it yet. So when I was talking to Caleb, it seemed like if the idea is to move to this KEPS process, so that when people are creating features, even before they write the code, they submit a KEP and stuff, and we roll in some of the documentation part of that. That will give us more visibility, and then get us kind of involved earlier on, so we know what's coming down the pipeline.
Andy, so using the KEP process as part of a wider, or part of rolling out the KEP process on a wider basis for future enhancements to Kubernetes, and using that as an opportunity to get let's call them early quality drafts of release notes into the publication process for a quarterly release.
Not just the release notes, but also even like the documentation that will need to be created and go into Kubernetes.io. Because my hope and vision would be that like we can use the KEPS process and have some sort of automated notification. So it would parse out the sections that were related to docs, whether it be release notes or the actual documentation. And then, like email us, and then we'll know, oh, like there's this feature coming up, there's this documentation, and then this is the, the engineer or whoever's in charge of it. And then we can start working with them, earlier on to get the docs and release notes done.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess I would love long-term for the KEP process itself to be owned by SIG PM, SIG Docs, and SIG Release moving forward. Because we are these kind of horizontal SIGs responsible for knowing what's coming in the release, or just knowing what's coming in general for the project and communicating that. Because if a PR without documentation is not useful to really anyone. So trying to get all of these processes tied together would be wonderful.
So then you're probably all asking, well, then, okay, what's the next step? So we were thinking about first just picking like one KEP as sort of a pilot and kind of going through that process like manually, and then seeing how that goes and then iterating on that. And Caleb, there was one that you thought might be a good candidate.
Yeah, we may want to start with the cluster API work. Their KEP is largely done. But we need now, once we've done the motivation, I guess as we have implementations come in, I think that KEP is going to see some active use because that work is really getting going here, at least on our side. I know, and so some other groups are also working pretty heavily on.
Andrew or Caleb, do you mind dropping a link to the PR in question or to the KEP in question for the cluster project?
Sure, we can pull it up.
Sure. It doesn't have to be right now. I just want to make sure that we get an example for the meeting notes.
And then who's going to be running 1.11?
Right now, we had talked about having Nick Chase run 1.11, but I have not followed up with him. And I have some thoughts about I have some thoughts about 1.11. If it's not Nick, it will be myself. But that's a follow-up conversation I need to have with Nick and would like to have with Nick first.
And just I'll step in here. Nick and I have also been talking about it, Zach. So it sounds as though the three of us should perhaps converge on a conversation.
Excellent.
Right. Yeah, so I just want to make sure whoever is in charge of the 1.11 docs release process is involved in this pilot, so we can kind of work out the, figure out the issues and see if it helps. Because if it doesn't help improve the process, then there's no point. But I think we should be able to. Does anyone have any questions? Any thoughts?
I do. So right now, I think the earliest notification that I'm thinking back to 1.9, the earliest notification that I saw of whether or not a feature would require documentation was the spreadsheet maintained by the release lead, Jay Singer Jamars, in the case of 1.9. So are you proposing to use this KEP process to, I guess, would notification of docs be any earlier? I mean, so I hear that you're trying to close the gap between, yes, there will be docs and here is an early draft of those docs, but will this proposal move docs any earlier in the release timeline?
We can, and the plan is to have automation notifications when new KEPs are created. Since they're checked into source control, that gives us a good opportunity to broadcast there, rather than being like a GitHub issue or pull request, which just kind of goes into the ether.
So is the plan then to gate check, to gate check a KEP submission that it cannot be accepted, or it's what am I saying? Are you planning to, or is it possible to add a gate check for documentation draft for KEP submission?
It's possible, and actually we should think about, actually, as you mention it, yeah, we should bring this up in contributor experience. So the owner's files today, the way we use them, it doesn't, I guess, allow for categories of required reviews. So there's no way of saying that, that these are the docs owners for this SIG. These are the engineering, the technical owners for this part of the tree. But it might be nice to extend that, just to have a line in the owner files. Sure. But we can do something that the way that Test Infra does this, they use GitHub code owners. So they get notifications when pull requests are open to various parts of the tree. So we can do that as well, and only have docs people pinged on that PR, so you automatically get added to a request.
Sure. So I also think about Jennifer and her experience with release notes in like 1.8 and 1.9 specifically, where when automation was happening, oftentimes like release note features would be filled out with TBD or things that meet the gate check are checked in, but no actual content is checked in. So I guess I like the idea that I'm hearing. I'm just not sure how it will immediately connect to getting to getting engineers to or feature owners to create better documentation earlier, rather than just saying, yes, this is where documentation will go, and then postponing it to the end. So there's I guess there's the part of the cycle that will make life easier for us, and then there's the part of the cycle, the other half of it, that where feature owners have to actually do that work earlier, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So,
is that part of the discussion as well? Sorry, go ahead, Jennifer.
well, I've been wondering, and I'm happy to hold back a bit further, but it seems as though the issue that I created this morning and the item that you asked me about that has been on the agenda about improving release note content is in fact pretty relevant here. Because if we step back, I mean, I don't know if you want me to pursue that. I think that what I've been chatting about with some other folks and tried to describe those conversations in the issue is related to what I'm hearing as the sort of higher level requirements that Andrew and Caleb are talking about here. But if there's more that we need to talk about with this specific process, then we could maybe finish that and then I can go on. I'm not sure which you prefer to do.
You could jump in.
Well, so, I was one of the release notes wranglers for 1.8. I was the main release note wrangler with Nick Chase for 1.9. And I've been, sort of not shadowing Nick, but following the work that he and Noah have been doing for 1.10. So I've been in the trenches with the release note pane. And I think that, my focus on improving process over the release cycle has been primarily on release notes. I think that docs can, sort of come along for the ride with some of the stuff that I've been thinking about and talking about with other folks. But that's been less of the focus. My experience wrangling docs for 1.10 is that the feature spreadsheet and working closely on tracking features with Ihor, for 1.10 at least, has worked quite well. Not everyone gets a stub PR in early, and yes, I had to do some pretty heavy-duty nagging of contributors on docs PRs over the course of the last couple of weeks. I also stepped into active engagement with those PRs relatively late in the cycle. So I don't think my experience of 1.10 is solid data for that issue. 1.10 also wound up being unexpectedly feature light. So I want to put sort of qualifiers around any stories I might tell about how well or poorly the current process works for docs as opposed to release notes. For release notes, however, we can and should do a lot better. And during the 1.9 release, I was hearing a fair amount about the KEPs and the proposal to institute them, and I was pretty excited about it, and I still am. But it turned out it was not something everybody got on board with right away, and so it's something that's going to get rolled out more slowly and possibly get iterated on over time. I think that we also have the opportunity in Sig Docs to improve release notes across SIGs without limiting ourselves to the KEP process. And to that end, I put some of the ideas that some of us have been talking about in the issue that's linked from the meeting notes. The short version is get release notes reviewed, well reviewed, ideally by someone from Sig Docs who's got a good grasp of what should be in the release notes when the PR is reviewed. Now, and my initial thought this came out in conversation with Andrew and Steve, was we could rotate Sig Docs maintainers through on a weekly basis, the way we're doing now for PR reviews in Kate's website. Realized fairly quickly, without even trying to assemble hard data, that that's too burdensome, even for a week. There's just too many PRs. But one of the things that Nick and Noah did for 1.10 is to establish a better set of labels for release notes. Because in addition to poor or non-existent release notes for features that needed them, we also, our current automated process generates release notes for implementation details that are not user-facing, that we do not actually need to ship release notes for. And so what Nick and Noah have been doing in the 1.10 timeline, and Nick's not here because he's in the release meeting, the release burndown today, is to develop a more fine-grained set of labels that it looks like they've done a pretty good job of getting those labels applied, so that we're filtering only on release notes that users really do need to read, and not every last little detail.
Are those labels visible in the linked PR?
I think so. I'm not looking right now. I have not investigated this thoroughly, and Nick and I haven't had a chance to meet as completely as I would like. But I did, since I've been a part of several conversations, and since I brought this up last week, I thought it would be a good idea to try to collate all of this conversational information in the issue so everybody can take a look. Because there's a lot more that needs to be done, right?
Sure.
And it needs to be iterative.
So
but
for the purposes of this conversation, does the release note proposal that do the changes to the release note process that you're suggesting, does that tie into the KEP process that Caleb and Andrew are talking about in a way that we can meaningfully see or test as a pilot?
I think so, yes. I'm not completely sure because I haven't a chance to think it through, but I'm coming at all of this from an original dream of getting the KEP process instituted, sort of across all the SIGs, and using that to wrangle better release notes. So I know what you guys are talking about. Given that we don't have that, that's where Nick and I started pursuing other options, right? So I definitely see these as, at worst, complementary, and at best, really kind of converging on good solutions.
So maybe
go ahead.
we could take a look at the actual KEP for a second, because if you can see, there's already a lot of things written. So I think some of that can be folded into the release note or the documentation. Like, for example, the summary, and then there's use cases and things like that. So maybe if one of these sections were kind of the short form version that we would use in a release note, that would kind of do both things. It would, give a quick summary, and we can reuse that as the release note for the particular feature. So, and then, a lot of this, already kind of describes what this should be doing. Which I think could easily be, refactored or used in the actual documentation that would need to be created for it. So, I mean, it's not perfect at this moment, but I think we can kind of massage it to repurpose parts of it and make the process a little bit better.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. I guess, my point was, we're at a point now where what the resources we have available are going to let us pilot the KEP approach, not across all features and all SIGs for a given release. So the kinds of bits and pieces that I've been talking about would, help serve release notes for other features that have not sort of gone through the KEP process yet. And we'd have to figure out how to make these things dovetail.
Yeah.
But that doesn't seem like an insurmountable barrier at all. And since other things that I talk about in the in the issue have to do with, for example, there's a release notes markdown file in SIG community that does not actually explain how to write a good release note. Now, the chances of people referring to that markdown file are small, but they're not completely non-existent. The more we can improve the material that people have available and promote it to help them write better release note copy, to think in terms of user-facing content, whether it's docs or release notes, the better off we're going to be, the better the material that we work from in it, in automated or semi-automated fashion is going to be, whether it's in a KEP or in an issue or in a PR. I'm thinking, we can also link out to that release notes markdown file from the PR template. Now, yes, we've all seen what happens to the PR template, especially for docs. People don't even fill it out, and the PRs just come in with the template still right there. But a few people do read it. It's like you try all the things. And at a certain point, yes, you have to say, well, no, wait a minute, what about this? And more conversation needs to happen. But the more resources that we can provide to people up front, being part of Paris's maintainers, new maintainers training, the more we do all of these things, the more I think we're going to help alleviate the docs and release notes pain.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think if we just treat this as sort of an exploratory thing and see how it might improve things, then that would be good.
That sounds awesome.
So I have a couple of questions. So is the thought that we might stop having release notes in PRs if we instead have them in the KEP document?
Yeah, if KEP becomes like the main process through which the release happens, then I think that would be what we would do, because then we can remove the redundancy.
And then for 111, I think what I'm hearing is that not all features for 111 will go through the KEP process. Is that true?
Yeah, I think that's correct. Caleb, is that right?
Yeah, it's SIGs and individual contributors can opt in. It's an opt-in process, both at the contributor and the SIG level.
Okay, so that does put us in sort of a transition period where we can try this, but it's not something we'll use across the board.
Right. I mean, it would, I think, be several releases before we could do that. But this is more to see, like, assuming we did get more of these features in as KEPs, like, early on, like, how might this help us improve the release notes and docs process?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Good questions. More questions for Andrew and Caleb. Okay. Andrew and Caleb, thank you. It sounds really exciting, and I'm really interested to see how it goes. And I'm interested to see how that can dovetail with Jennifer's suggestions for better release note process in general. So cool.
Yeah, can I just add, Zach? I mean, anybody who's interested in the release note situation at all, please feel free to weigh in on that issue. It's wide open. I created it so that we could have, sort of a community-wide, ongoing discussion about what's doable at, what stage. This is going to have to be iterative. We can't do everything, for 1.11, but we can make incremental progress. And I feel like Nick, especially, who couldn't be on this call, and Noah, his shadow, have done some really good things to put better support for automation of the release notes in place. So I want to partly I want to call out Nick, and partly I want to invite people to weigh in on the issue.
So Jennifer, you've already talked a bit about the about your proposal for improved release note content. Is there anything more that you'd like to say about that?
I don't think so. When I saw the item in the agenda, I kind of expected these two items to dovetail, the KEP item, I mean. I wasn't sure it was going to be about KEP, but I had a guess that it might be. So, unless anybody has questions, but if you don't have them now, you can put them in the issue where we can discuss in the Slack channel. The floor is open.
Thank you, Jennifer. All right, moving on, let's talk about migrating the website from Jekyll to Hugo. So to give you an update, Jared and myself and Andrew and Jennifer and Joe Heck met yesterday with Bjorn Erik Pedersen, and we have decided to go forward with the migration process. And functionally, what that's going to look like is that Bjorn is going to do 2 days, 16 hours worth of work, and that will result, that's going to be work that's involved in like assessment, making some, hang on one moment. Assessment, making some trial attempts at getting a Hugo build integrated with Netlify, with a Netlify instance up, and get a proof of concept, and also make sure that he has a true sense of what the actual migration work would require. And when we have that initial assessment, we're going to review that. And Sig Docs maintainers, if you are a Sig Docs maintainer, I'm going to invite you to that meeting for 2 purposes. One, to meet Bjorn and just get the chance to interact briefly, so that when we start giving feedback, we're able to attach names with faces. And 2, to review, make sure that we're seeing the full scope of what the migration is going to entail, and make sure that we have a full set of maintainer eyes on any proposed changes that migrating to Hugo would incur. For example, Andrew, just following Andrew and his observations yesterday, Hugo is not, so Jekyll is Ruby based, Hugo is not, so there are some things that will change in our tooling. The config.yaml in the website root directory, no more gems included. So it's going to be interesting to see how our website maintains its current function in a different stack, with a slightly different tooling chain. And it's going to be important for all of us to put eyes on any of those proposed changes and make sure that we get a full sense of what in our tooling chain is actually going to change and be different. So that's the initial work. I'm going to set up a meeting where we sync again with Bjorn, I think next Wednesday. And if you're a Sig Docs maintainer, you'll be included on that invitation. Bjorn is in Norway, so we have to meet early on the West Coast, so it'll be about 9 a.m. Just to give you a heads up for the invitation that's coming. One thing that Bjorn pointed out about the migration process is that when we are ready to actually cut over the site from Jekyll to Hugo, any open PRs that we have become a source of potentially large merge conflicts. So as we get close to an actual merge, we're going to need to have a PR reckoning, I guess, where all of our PRs are either merged prior or are closed, just to avoid the massive merge conflicts that are going to come after that. So in terms of what that means for us for action going towards the migration from here, we need to keep our PR queue low, and we need to maybe start thinking about PRs that need to be merged before that migration process finishes, and things that we can let go or postpone. In terms of how long that migration process is actually going to take, we talked with Bjorn and let him know that our quarterly release cycle means that ideally, well, we need to be, if we're going to migrate to Hugo in the next couple of months, we need this by May 1st, because that's realistically as close as we can get to 1.11 and still have any chance of meaningfully merging PRs and doing documentation for 1.11. And he seemed to think that was no problem. So I guess the summary is Sig Docs maintainers expect a meeting invitation to meet with Bjorn next Wednesday, early on West Coast time, so 9 a.m. And we'll be looking for changes to our tooling stack, and also keep an eye out for open PRs, and be conscious and mindful of our PR queue and of potential merge conflicts that might arise as we move towards migration. I know there's a lot of information in sort of a fast dump. Questions, comments, concerns?
Yeah, I don't think we're going to get to 0 PRs, and I don't think we want to just close PRs that we can't get merged. I think we'll just have to live with a certain list of PRs that are going to hang on through the process, and then there'll be some extra work to do, if when it comes time to merge those.
Yeah, I agree. I think we should try to keep that number in the single digits, preferably one that I can count on one hand.
I can't imagine getting it below 25. There are just too many of them that have things sitting in the way.
Yeah, I agree. I think there might be ways to migrate some of those over, but I think we should do a really good job of due diligence and closing the ones that we can. Ones that are outdated, reaching out to the people who filed them, maybe declaring bankruptcy on a few that are no longer relevant or very low priority, and restaging them against the new site. I think with some of these ones that are sort of hanging out at the very end, we'll have to come up with a plan around that. But I think being aggressive during the migration and trying to get that down to the smallest number possible is going to save us a lot of headaches when we cut over.
And I think if we do some early, sorry.
No, all you. Go ahead.
I think if we can do early signaling to PR owners as well, and say, hey, migration is coming up. If you don't merge this PR prior to this migration, there may be a lot more work involved. And just making sure that we set expectations adequately. I want to hold off on doing that until we've had the 2-day review, just to make sure that we have a solid thumbs up from Bjorn that the migration is within scope, is within the scope that he expects, that he can finish, and can give us a date by which he expects that migration to be possible. And I just want to wait until we have a firmer basis for which to set expectations before we actually start setting expectations. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Oh, that's a good, Joe, that's a really good idea, is reaching out through Kubernetes, and Paris reaching out and working with you to make sure that we get as much visibility to the community and to the contributor community as possible.
Yeah, we actually, in contributor experience in our charter, recently did our communication plan. And that might be good for you to bake into your charter as well on how you're communicating out your changes. For instance, on contributor experience, anytime we have a major change, first we socialize it with our working group mailing list. Oh my gosh, it's not a working group, it's a SIG. I don't know what I'm talking about. With our SIG mailing list. And then after that, we lazy consensus time box it in. And then once that happens and prototyping's begun, then we email KK and then also email the SIG leads. And then in some cases, steering committee if needed. And that is going to be our go forward always now, so that SIG leads and people that are heavily involved in SIGs know that contributor changes are coming. And we've even included like a special subject line that says notice in big capital letters. So now, some of the folks that have complained in the past now know that those are the channels that we're using. So I would definitely try to keep that in mind with docs, and it could be a good way to have folks know where to look in the future for anything docs related outside of coming into this meeting or joining your mailing list.
Sure. Paris, is there a place, if I go to SIG Contribx, is there, or if I go to Kubernetes community, are the guidelines that you're talking about easily discoverable?
Yep. So if you go to it's in our charter. So if you go to SIG contributor experience folder on the community repo, and then you'll see charter. It's in the charter.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep. And I can help you with your charter too, if you want to do that offline.
Thank you. Yeah, that'd be great.
Yep.
So one last question on what we do with PRs during the migration to Hugo. Can we somehow turn off accepting PRs for that 2-week period?
I think that's a really good idea.
Yeah, I think we should make an announcement to the community to let them know that this migration is coming and that we're going to be doing this PR bankruptcy and cutover at some point, and so that way, like, we don't get a flood of PRs right before we're trying to cut over.
In terms of actually turning off the ability to open PRs, I've never tried that. I don't know if there's a repo level setting that lets us do that or restrict PRs to like a group with a different access level. I've never tried to do it. I don't know.
Yeah. Or if not that, maybe we could change the template to say something like, don't do it.
Right.
Not now. Wait 2 weeks.
Ignore all of the documentation that's sent you to this point. Just don't do it.
Yeah.
Okay. But yeah, I agree that turning off the spigot for 2 weeks leading up to the actual migration cutover is a really good idea.
Yeah.
Thank you for the copy paste, Paris. Yeah, Joe chimes in and says, I don't think we can turn off PRs in a public repo, but we can reply and get back and get more responsive saying, close, please come back in 2 weeks. Like whoever's is wrangling PRs in those 2 weeks can have a copy pasta splat handy and just get used to clicking close a lot. Okay, so if there's more, there will be more questions and more information as we go. If you have questions or concerns or suggestions as we move along this process, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to make sure that that any questions are addressed. The next concrete step will be an invite sent out to Sig Docs maintainers to participate in the 2-day review. All right, let's talk about an update for the PR Wrangler queue. Steve, thanks for being the Wrangler last week. I see that you noted that there were lots of tech review needed and docs open issues. Do you want to say anything about the PR queue last week?
Yeah, just that I merged and closed many, but they come in almost as fast as you can work on them. And then there were several that, I went through and looked at them and maybe added some labels, but they're in this state of waiting for either a tech review or a doc review issue to be resolved. And then I guess the third category that's a bit stuck would be ones that say, something like work in progress, do not merge.
So I am the Wrangler this week, and I noticed when I was reviewing the PRQ last night, I saw the PRs that you had touched for that week, and there are a lot of issues right now that either need tech review or need docs review. I don't know what to do differently about those, other than in some cases where it was clear that people had been assigned, or that there was a clear task, I went through and I left a comment saying, hey, please follow up on this. I don't know what to do other than continuing to do what we're doing, and maybe set an expectation that if action has been assigned, or like some kind of action has been assigned and there's no response in 30 days, or I don't even know if we need to do that. We're just going to let BetaBot stale it out.
Well, I wouldn't wait that long. Like, I mean, even for tech reviews and stuff, what I used to do is if I didn't get a response within even a couple of days, I would just reassign the review to someone else and just keep going down the list until someone responded.
That seems reasonable too. Yeah, I noticed on a couple, I think a couple where you, Andrew, had commented that the original tech reviewer assigned had not been responsive. So I looked at the front matter at the top and just assigned the next person down.
Yeah, you can also look in the owner's aliases file now, and if you know what SIG it's related to, look for other people there.
Nice, good point.
Yeah, and does the bot do anything about stale PRs? I don't think I've ever seen that happen. I've seen stale issues, but I don't know if I've seen stale PRs.
So, yeah, now that you mention it, I don't remember ever having seen a stale PR, but
yeah.
I also haven't seen a PR that hasn't gotten action in longer than 90 days.
Oh, go to the bottom of the very bottom of the list. There are a few sitting down there.
Yep, I noticed those.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, in that case, I think, maybe we can't rely on the bot to stale things out. So I guess let's include in the PR rotation. And Joe, I may make an update to your Wrangler guidelines to be more active in pursuing reviews and in closing things where action has not been clear or is starting to stale out. So we've got PR Wranglers for the next 2 weeks after this. Jennifer is next week. Andrew is the week following. Jennifer, I know that with the release slipping to Monday, that you are a brave soul to even consider picking up a PR Wrangler rotation. Would you like to let that go for a week?
If someone else is willing to pick it up, it might be prudent. But for what it's worth, I have also been monitoring, regardless of who's formally assigned, I have been monitoring the PRQ sort of coming in behind you assiduously because of a situation that we inevitably have, especially toward the end of a release where folks submit to the wrong branch. And I've been really trying hard to keep, well, first of all, to track all of the 1.10 related docs PRs, because there have been, various sort of upstream release related issues, just feeling like that's part of my responsibility. So I think I might not be taken on too much, but I'm really not sure. So if somebody else is willing to step up, I will happily take the week after Andrew in exchange.
Okay.
And if not, I'll manage next week. I also have a light week the rest of the week. So as long as the release doesn't slip, I think I'll be okay.
Okay. Well, if you are willing to take on the PR Wrangler rotation next week, it's a great opportunity. Now is an excellent time. You can also reach out offline, and we can talk about the rotation queue then. But yeah, Jennifer, let's stay in touch over the next few days about the queue rotation.
Sounds good.
All right.
Hey, for the next meeting, can we revisit the whole using master as like the next branch, like the other repos? Because I've kind of come around on it, and I know how we can do it.
I've also come around to thinking that it's probably what we should do. The using master for as the engineering teams do is so ingrained in people's minds. It's just really hard for them to adjust to our opposite way of doing it. So I'd like to have that discussion again.
And I'll be a strong third to that proposal. The thing that I see happen is even folks who know that Docs does it differently get confused. They know they're not supposed to submit to master, but oh my goodness, what do I do? And they'll ask questions in the PR. So well-intentioned folks from outside our little world get confused by what we do.
Okay. Yeah, that's real. All right.
The TLDR is just that every release we'll just have to change our default branch to, like for example, when 1.10 is out, we'll just change that to default branch, and then master will be the next branch, used as for the PRs for the next release. But we can go into that in more detail next time.
Okay. All right. That will be on our agenda next week. Hopefully 1.10 will be out the door and will no longer be a going concern. And we can take a deep breath and have the branching strategy conversation. Okay. Let's see. Chris, I see a note from you here about new provider hosting and impact on Docs. Yep. So tell us more.
So we talked a few weeks ago about kind of a desire to make providers responsible for their documentation and removing that from the upstream branches. In the working group cloud provider meetings, they pretty much everyone agrees that that's a good idea. And with the migration of all of the external providers moving into, it'll still be hosted in Kubernetes community repositories, but will be managed by the individual owners of those SIGs. As part of that process, we're defining common structure and common requirements across all repositories to make sure that we improve the user experience so that users have a consistent experience in discovering and using the provider code. And that includes having a consistent document structure, including required getting started guides and a docs location. So our expectation is that the technical requirements are going to evolve during the 1.11 release, but that we should be nailed down by the end of the 1.11 release, and we'll probably be working with the docs team to see how we can produce those documents and have them published. So that's something that I know that it came up as a concern a few weeks ago, and the cloud provider working group is interested in helping find a good solution to that.
Awesome.
So I dropped a link to the pull request that it's the pull request I dropped in there is just moving some documents that were merged on Monday, but that pretty much contains all of the information and the motivations behind what we're doing.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Anyway, that's it for me, unless anyone has any questions.
So I just want to be clear, are you talking about taking provider-specific documentation that's on the site, or that's in the documentation site now, and rehoming it in a more consistent format?
Essentially, yes. That's right now. There's within the docs site. There's documentation for the AWS and OpenStack providers on how to run them. with the KEP to move all of the providers to the external cloud controller manager. We feel like it's an opportunity for all of the current upstream providers, and that includes the GC, the Google Cloud provider, the Azure, the OpenStack, and I think I'm forgetting one. For all for all of them to kind of have a consistent set of documentation describing how this works, and the idea is that users are going to be coming and looking for these things, and if we provide consistency across that for all of the providers, like each one of them has a getting started guide, each one of them has a document that describes the settings that are available to it, how to enable the provider, through their preferred installer mechanisms. That this will do a few things. It relieves the burden from the docs team of maintaining those documents, which I think was one of the goals that we were talking about a few weeks ago. But it also still provides users with that expected experience, since the cloud providers are common. They're common things that people are using, and with the move to the external cloud controller manager, I think it's going to be it's an opportunity for us to improve that user experience.
Cool. All right. So I'm really interested to take a look at this PR and see, and just take a look at the discussion more deeply. Would you be willing to follow up on this again next week?
Of course, yeah.
Okay, very cool. I'm just going to put a note to follow up on this next week.
Yeah, and the idea is, we have the technical requirements there, but since we're all going to be in the process of figuring this out over the next release cycle, that requirements document, at least for the 1.11 development cycle, is subject to change, and so if there's input from docs about how you would want to consume the data in that repository to publish it, those repositories to publish it, that's we're figuring it out as we go along.
Sure. Okay. I noticed that we're at time. I want to honor people's time. Steve, I see you have a note at the very end. Is this something that we can go over quickly about reopening issues related to the migration?
Just that I will do this. The bot has been closing down some of those big planning issues about taking sections of the docs and refactoring. So I'm reopening them so we don't lose them. That's all.
Okay.
Is that bot even helpful? Like, if it's not, we should have it turned off.
I kind of like it.
Okay.
I find I don't have the nerve to say this thing's old, get rid of it. So I appreciate it.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Yeah, I appreciate it too.
Yeah, I believe there's ways to tweak the bot too, so that it works in your favor. Like we might be able to do, like if it has the label planning on it, or auto adjust your labels or something like that, then the bot might pick up those things. So I guess another way to look at that would be, what are the common themes amongst the ones that you have open right now that are older than that, and how can we adjust the bot so that it doesn't pick those up?
Mm-hmm.
But
Can the bot be ever in your favor?
Can we give the bot a persona? Is there a selection of personas that we could change? Can we have like old showbiz bot? It's like, sorry.
Oh, guys, I almost forgot. We don't have to put this in the agenda, but the role of Sig Docs lead for the release now has a name. It's Otto.
Otto.
Like
Yes.
OTTO or AUTO?
Well, OTTO, but it's a homonym pun. I'll explain next week.
Okay.
Very good. Homonym puns going on the agenda. You think I'm joking.
Oh, you writers.
Yeah. All right. We are over time, so if you have something to discuss, let's discuss it next week. Thanks for a good meeting, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Take care.